Hi everyone, back to Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris back with my rant stroke thought of the day. And you know what it's all about. It's all about APT. No, I'm not talking about the funky song by Bruno Mars and Rose. Sadly, that's way more enjoyable than this situation. No, it's about the associate party transaction ruling and the recent ruling with Manchester City and the Premier League reaching an impasse or an agreement or whatever you want to call it, and basically downing swords and agreeing to move forward with it. What does it mean for Newcastle United? I've seen the Twitterverse or Xverse, whatever you want to call it, blow up from one side and the other. Some fans think it's great, time to spend. Some fan thinks it's not very good. The truth always lies somewhere in the middle. But I'm going to talk about what's happened really. So if you didn't know already, Manchester City took the Premier League to task about the associate party transaction rules. Now, a little bit of background on that if you weren't aware of it or if you've been asleep for the past 3 years. These rules were put in place back in 2021, and it was basically to stop Newcastle United from just running away with things. You know, when the Saudi Arabians bought us, the PIF bought 80% of us, that is. Because everyone was worried, the Premier League was worried. They were introduced in December 2021. And it was pushed through by people like Jurgen Klopp, who I'm fully aware I am dressed quite like on this recording, but I have just woke up, my hair is a mess, and my glasses are needed to read this article. So that's why I'm not trying to dress like Jurgen Klopp, turkey teeth. But he was a big driver in it, and so were all the rest of the clubs as well. And they basically brought this in because they thought that the Saudi Arabians were going to run away, do loads of deals with Saudi Airlines, Saudi this, Saudi that. Newcastle were going to have all this commercial revenue coming in. They're just going to go and buy the best players, kind of Galactico style Real Madrid, which obviously wasn't going to happen. But the Premier League made sure of it by putting in these APT rules. Now, Man City challenged them on these APT rules last year, and they said they were misleading and suggested that the regulations could be swiftly amended and threaten further legal action if there was a knee-jerk reaction. Now, the Premier League went away and they decided to tweak this. Now, City challenged them on the shareholder loans that no Arsenal benefited from as well. And they said that they should be exempt from the rules, but it went to the vote of the Premier League. And despite Newcastle United, Forest and Villa all voting, as well as City, to get rid of that, that was pushed through by the rest of the clubs. Again, I've heard this before. It's like turkeys voting for Christmas, isn't it? Really, it's ridiculous. But the rules were allowed to sit in place. Now, the Premier League and City have been having a little bit of a scrap about this behind the scenes. But what they've done, and this is the scary part, so they've reached this settlement that about the commercial deals, and this is all going to help City push through a deal with Etihad Airways, I think, which is a renewal of a deal, because again, it's going to be assessed by the Premier League, and fair market value is the line that they use. But the scary thing about this is that City have had to make or done this settlement with the Premier League, and then they have to agree that the current APT rules that they used to claim were unlawful are now valid and binding. Now, that's a scary statement to say in terms of that valid and binding. So that means City won't challenge the current rules and their current guys. And that means because City won't challenge it, nobody else can really challenge it. Now, there was loads of rumours and loads of stories that Newcastle United were waiting for Man City to get some kind of ruling on this before they decide what they do. I don't think that was fully true, to be brutally honest with you. I think Newcastle United would have always realised that this was probably going to reach an impasse some way or some shape or form. This is totally separate, by the way, to the alleged 115 charges of breach that Manchester City have been accused of, in the Premier League. That is still to be decided. But I actually think this kind of settlement is almost the beginning of that resolution happening. I still don't think, I've always stood by this, I don't think Manchester City are going to get battered by the Premier League. They're not going to get relegated, as some crazy maniacs have claimed. That's not going to happen. They're not going to flick out Manchester City out of the Premier League with Pep Guardiola's marketing appeal and Erling Haaland's marketing appeal and everything else that City have globally now. They've become a super club. They're a massive club. And I love the fact that the other red cartel hate that. City are new money. City were the last lottery winners, the chavs that won the lottery. They're in the country club and now they can't kick them out because they've got so much money. It's quite funny to see that. Sadly for Newcastle United, we won the lottery where these rules and shutters have gone down, so our owners have not been able to spend. But it's kind of been back and forth all over the social media angle. I even reached out to the Oracle of Football Finance and asked him the question, and he basically said what I thought was the answer as well. Now, that's Kieran Maguire, if you don't know that. But I asked him the question and he gave me a good answer as well. And he basically said nothing changes as far as Newcastle United. They can still do Saudi Arabian deals, but they will be subject to assessment for fair market value. Now, what I would say with Newcastle United and the whole APT scenario is with City challenging it and tweaking the rules slightly, it may have given Newcastle the ability to discuss more Saudi Arabian deals with PIF's associated partners. But you can bet your bottom dollar that will be forensically examined by the Premier League to stop any deals going through that they think will make Newcastle United more money than they deem acceptable in the market value rate. This is the same organisation, by the way, that still has the PSR financial loss level at 109 million when it was introduced back in 2017. It's now 2025. Inflation has gone like that, and these fuckers are still living in the past with that figure. So what does that tell you about the fair market value they're going to put in place for Newcastle United's commercial deals? I mean, they were looking at Alan Saint-Maximin and challenging that for whatever it was. I think it was 25 million quid or something like that. If anything, Newcastle sold him cheaper than they should have done. If they sold him to Europe, they would have been getting 40 or 50 million quid. We just paid 40 million quid for Jacob Ramsey. So no disrespect to Jacob Ramsey. At that time, Saint-Maximin was carrying Newcastle. So we should have got more money for him, but we sold him to Saudi Arabia for a cheaper fee to help us that particular moment. We sold Elliot Anderson for 30 million quid. Elliot Anderson's got an England cap now, he's probably worth double that. So, Newcastle have got to be very careful and tiptoe around the APT and the Premier League because they're just waiting to get us on things. They really, really are. I have said before in rants before, fuck it, just go big and fucking do it and take the hit. I mean, Newcastle could do a little bit of that and they could take the hit because I generally don't think the Premier League can punish clubs too much. I know they want to come down on Newcastle and they want to make an example of Newcastle because they don't like the fact that they were bought by the PIF. They don't like it. None of the Red Cartel, Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal, Spurs in there as well, Chelsea. I don't even think City were that arsed, to be honest with you. I think a City, again, their new money, City aren't going to challenge that ruling. They are in that kind of greedy six, if you want to call it that. But I do think City are outsiders in that. So I've always got a bit of time for City in that regard. But the kind of legacy cartel clubs, even heard Sir Jim Twatcliffe when he said that he was under some kind of understanding that there was one rule for these clubs and one rule for the rest of the clubs because he's such an arrogant, stupid, rich wank that he didn't realize you're not supposed to say that on camera. So he kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit there. And there's no doubt that the Premier League had put that ruling in because of the likes of Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal shitting themselves. The Newcastle were going to go and hoover up all the best talent. Fast forward now, the Liverpool has spent $500 million in this transfer window. So what does that tell you? It's obviously working, isn't it? But loads of takes about this. I seen a really good take actually from Mark Douglas on X. I think was probably one of the most poignant takes I've seen about this, really. And I think he's basically saying that, from dealings with PIF, he thinks that the idea that aligned companies will suddenly drop huge sponsorship deals that facilitate Newcastle spend wildly is unrealistic and speaks to the lack of understanding of how the fund operates and how it operated since the takeover. The club that pushed to rush through these modified APT rules got it very wrong. In his opinion, I think it's not about City there, set the Premier League up for a fight that ultimately they've had to spend a fortune on when PIF seem to have always had it in their minds that any investment in Newcastle United would have to broadly follow the fair market principles the Premier League already had in place. Now, just to unpack that a little bit, I don't disagree with Mark. I think Mark Douglas is bang on there. But this is the issue that you have with Newcastle United. And I've seen a few comments underneath that post from Mark. Very good interactions, to be fair, for X anyway. No screaming, shout, no calling them names. I thought that was probably further down the page. I didn't look at that. But the initial reaction to that is, why are PIF not flexing more? Why are they not saying, fuck you, Premier League, and doing what they need to do? Newcastle United is such a small, finite investment in the PIF's broader portfolio. And I think that's the bit that frustrates all of us as fans, because Newcastle United is massive to us. It's everything to us. We want these guys to spend copious amounts of money on the football club and get us up to challenging for Premier Leagues and getting Champions League every season. But to them, it's a small investment. They wanted to come into football. They kind of knew the rules. Then the Premier League went, oh shit, these guys are coming in, let's make more rules. And the PIF want to follow the rules because they don't want to be seen to be flaunting rules, breaking the rules financially. They obviously have it in their mind that they want to be that organization that is following whatever rules are set out in terms of investment guides. Now, the Saudi Arabian League, they don't need to follow them rules because they write the rules themselves and do whatever the fuck they want. Same over the golf and the Formula One, the boxing, they can do whatever they want, throw as much money out as they want. They can throw 400 million at something. It's like a fiver down the back of the sofa for these guys. They don't give a fuck. But with football, and certainly the Premier League, they can't do that. But, saying that, they have spent a lot of money thus far on Newcastle United. Now, the biggest issue that Newcastle United have right now is revenue as a football club. We don't generate the same revenue as Manchester United do, even though they're not as good as us on the pitch. They're not as good as us in the dugout either, by the way. That guy's a fucking chancer, but stay away from Eddie Howe. But going back to this whole situation, Manchester United make all that money because of the legacy of Old Trafford and the globalization of the fan base. Same with Liverpool. They're very much a tourist fan base. There's a lot of Liverpool fans in there, Liverpudlians. I'm not having a dig at them, but there's a fucking lot of tourist fans that come in to Anfield, come into Old Trafford, and that's how they get their global brand and their gate revenues and all that stuff going around. Newcastle start to do a bit of that. As a local fan who hasn't got a season ticket anymore, go to the ballots. I don't win no ballots. A lot of people said the same thing, don't win any ballots, because there's only a finite number of tickets for so many people around the world globally now applying for tickets. So Newcastle United are only going to improve that and improve the revenue of the gate by moving to a new stadium and the end of it. Now, we've got David Hopkinson, who's coming as the new CEO. It's his job to generate revenue. I don't know what's going to happen with the new stadium. It's all gone very, very quiet with the new stadium. That is the kind of the main way Newcastle United can increase the revenues of football club, because it increases the gate revenue. It allows for more fans to come in. The tickets will go up, guys. I'm sorry, they will go up in price. There is no doubt about that. You know, they've already had a little bit of stick recently about third parties buying tickets for games, selling them for £300-400 online. That's what the likes of Chelsea, Manchester United, Liverpool all have as clubs. Arsenal, they all have that problem. And Newcastle are starting to have that problem now. Now, they're saying that they're doing something about it. You know, I don't know if the trust are dealing with it or whatever. I saw a couple of tweets about it. I can't tell if it was the trust or it was the other people who want to be the trust. I get a bit mixed up with the two of them sometimes. But that was the situation. So Newcastle have had to come out basically saying, no, that's not happened. They resold the Forest tickets, I think, as almost a display of that. But Newcastle are in a very much a transitional chamber here in terms of having increased the revenue as a football club. And the only way to do it is match day gates, really. And I think a new stadium is the only way to get it done. But going back to this situation with APT, I think Newcastle will be able to do small incremental deals with associated Saudi Arabian partners of the PIF or, you know, the Rubens, whatever it may be. But there won't be seismic cash injecting changes. You know, there is still, you know, tap-ins for Newcastle United, you know, the name and the training ground sponsor, the training kit sponsor, the new stadium. Obviously, these are tap-ins for Newcastle in terms of increasing revenue, but we haven't heard anything about it yet. We've been pretty rudderless upstairs, you know, for nearly a year now, you know, because of obviously Darren Neal's ill health, and we wish him well, you know, in terms of his health and everything else. You know, football and business and football and all that shit aside, that's a human being, and, you know, I hope he gets well and stays well, you know. But with terms of Newcastle United upstairs in the boardroom, it's not been great, you know, over the last kind of 12 to 18 months. So now David Hopkinson's in, the sporting director will follow. So they'll take care of the football side of things and the interactions and the kind of cohesion between Eddie Howe and the sporting director and signing players and contract renewals and all that stuff. And David Hopkinson will concentrate on increasing revenue, which he's done very, very well, you know, his time in America and at Real Madrid as well. I mean, work for Real Madrid, you see exactly what the kind of the gold standard is of increasing global revenue around the world. That's what Real Madrid are great at. They're shit at a lot of other things, but they're great at that. You know, so if Newcastle could even follow a tenth of what Real Madrid do, then the revenue will increase. But yeah, this, to close this off, the whole kind of APT ruling, it doesn't really give Newcastle any edge, I don't feel. It doesn't give City any edge either, because their deals are still forensically examined. I think this is a compromise between City and the Premier League, which may help the final decision on the 100+ alleged charges. I still don't think City will get punished massively for that. I think there'll be a little bit of a slap. That will be a more seismic change in football than this APT settlement will be. When Manchester City's final ruling of their alleged 115 charges is done, that's when you'll see something potentially happen with Newcastle United. Because if Manchester City have allegedly breached 115 times and they get even a 6-point deduction and a big cash fine, that Newcastle could then go back and go, okay, that's the worst case scenario. Maybe we can overspend a little bit, not wildly, but maybe we can fail a PSR in one window or something like that, and then just take the hit, you know, because of everything else that'll come, Champions League qualifications, league positions, trophies winning, whatever it is. But until that deal is done, until that kind of agreement or finalization is done of Man City's alleged 115 charges, that is not going to change for Newcastle United. They have to go by the rules. We've had a great summer in terms of transfer signings. We've spent over 200 million on players coming in. Obviously, we sold Alexander Isak going out for 130 million. So I think the net is about 90 million. So Newcastle have had a good window in terms of player investment, a bad window in terms of losing a star player. But that's something Newcastle are probably going to have to get better at, is player trades. And that's something I think David Hopkinson will have to do to, again, improve that kind of regular cash flow of transfer pots to be able to buy players. It's not what we want to hear, because we might have to sell good players in prime positions, in terms of, what they've done. And like Liverpool have had to do it over the years, Luis Suarez, Coutinho, Aston Villa most recently have done it quite a lot, with Douglas Luiz and John Duran, who was a fucking maniac, by the way. I mean, good striker, but what a screwball he is, man. He's totally fucked his career. He really, really has. But players like that, you have to sell cash in players. And, obviously, rather than selling academy players like Anderson and Rams, who you've invested loads of time in, you might have to sell one of these guys you bought for 30 million and sell them for 100 million, or like Isak, 60 million for 130 million. It'll hurt your team maybe in the short term, but in the long term, you'd be better off for it, as long as you invest it right in the market. The jury's out on that for Newcastle United. We're going to be back this week for Premier League action with our new signings with Wissa and Walter Marder. So then we'll get to see whether we are massively worse off with Alexander Isak or not. But keep it evermore in the meantime, guys. Like and subscribe. We'll be back with a match preview for Wolves and obviously the live post-match on Saturday. But I just wanted to jump on, give you my take on APT. Very catchy pop song, but in terms of the rules for Manchester City in the Premier League, what it does for Newcastle, don't really think it changes anything, sadly, guys. We have to still play by the rules. Maybe the odd little commercial deal done if the actual commercial team can do any deals. But I don't think it changes anything massively, in my opinion, guys. But let me know what you think, what your opinion is in the comments below. Always like to hear from it. Keep it above the belt, of course. Don't be a twat. Oh, that's the end of that. So I'm going to try and mix that up a little bit with a prick line. I hope you like that one. But yeah, let's keep it clean. We're all talking about football at the end of the day. No need for any abuse. Just keep it in the comments below, guys. We'll do our best to reply to them. We always like it when you comment. We always take the time to reply if possible. But keep it evermore. Like and subscribe. Get us that 12,000 mark. I've got a mint prize to give out for the 12,000 subscriber mark. I might tell you what that is in the next few days. But I want a couple of more subs in to get me closer to the mark before I tell you what the prize is. But thanks for watching. Have a belter, and we'll see you later.
Heroes celebrate. They have done it.